Hello and welcome to Uncommon Law, my podcast about true stories from my life experience of over 50 years as a lawyer and trial judge. This is a look at the law from the inside out, stuff they don't teach in law school. This is Judge Rudy Greco, retired justice of the New York State Supreme Court. I lived in Jackson Heights since 1974. In 1988, a group started, a local neighborhood group called the Jackson Heights Beautification Group started because about 8 neighbors of mine were tired of the neglect by city agencies in the neighborhood. Specifically, I think everybody was walking in dog waste every third step. And that was enough to get people started. And 8 of them got together. And one of them was a guy named Mike Crowley, and Mike was, he looked presidential, he spoke presidentially, and he acted presidentially. And it turns out they elected Mike president, and it was a good thing because for the next 2 years he led the group and he was presidential. He did a very, very nice job of getting the group started and organized and up on its feet in the very critical early stages of the group. Well, in 1989, a year after the group started, they called a town meeting at the local Catholic school auditorium, which was big, and the place held about 600 or 700 people, and it was standing room only, and there were people online trying to get in outside. It was a very controversial subject, the meeting. It was about a proposal for a new office building, commercial and office building, that was going to be built right nearby on 37th Avenue on a commercial strip. And the property had been occupied by a whole row of storefronts, a shoe store, a restaurant, a drugstore, what have you, single story. And there were 3 suspicious fires before the place burned down. And when it finally burned down, the owners proposed a new 12-story office building covered with mirrored glass, built full right to the lot line. And it was so objectionable in the neighborhood. We live in a very nice neighborhood with old brick buildings dating back to the teens and the early 20s. It was so offensive that people really took umbrage at it and turned out. And actually, it was a blessing because that meeting galvanized the existence of the beautification group and caused scores of people to join as active members, and it was really, really good in a perverse way. It was just what the group needed. Well, that night, I joined the beautification group in a sense because I was like everybody else. I was upset about that proposal. It was this very selfish proposal. As of right, the building should have been 9 stories with the zoning. They wanted 12. It should have been set back. It should have had a garage. And we wanted it to blend in with the rest of the neighborhood and maybe even enhance the look of the neighborhood, which was a very handsome architectural look for the whole neighborhood, and it was brick. These guys wanted to put something that belonged in Brasilia or the Coney Island Fun House. It was a house of mirrors. It was terrible. It was cheap. So I got Mike Crowley after he came down off the podium. People were speaking, various politicians were up, and the developers and their lawyer was up. And I told Mike, I said, Mike, I'll volunteer. I'm a lawyer, and I've been to the Board of Standards and Appeals that grants variances. They have no hardship. They don't deserve any variance at all. And I'll volunteer my services on behalf of the community free of charge, pro bono. And Mike took me up on the offer. So I immediately went. He says, you got it. And I went to the attorney whom I knew who was representing the developers, and I said, listen, I'm going to represent these people pro bono, and I know I've represented people on all sides of the questions at the Board of Standards and Appeals, pro and con, and I hope your clients have a very good construction loan because I'm going to tie you up for a minimum of 3 years in the proceedings over there because this is a bunch of crap, and it's got to change. Oh, and he hit the panic button. What's wrong, button? Let's talk. We can talk, So eventually we did. And they understood we could tie them up, and they knew they were overreaching, and they ended up building it as of right. We gave them a rendering, an artist rendering by one of our members who was an architect, just did a drawing of what the place should look like. And lo and behold, about a year later, they came up with the plan, and it looked exactly the way we asked them to do it. It was set back. It was 9 stories, not 12. It was brick, and it actually looked nice. as per the rendering that our member did, and it actually enhanced the look of the neighborhood. We couldn't stop them from building as a right. They had the legal power to do a 9-story building, but they did it, and we had them include a garage because parking in our neighborhood is at a premium, and you can't have a commercial building without a garage without causing even more, constraint upon the available parking spaces, which were too few to begin with. So that was a happy ending. I joined the beautification group. I became a director on the board of directors, and eventually, after 2 years, I succeeded Mike Crowley as the president of the organization. And we were going on and going about, and we used to have monthly regular board meetings. And at one of them, I pitched an idea that I had, which was a hybrid from two instances that I knew about. The first one was as a kid in Brooklyn on Thanksgiving morning. It was a tradition in Brooklyn. It was like a ragamuffin parade or a ragamuffin day. Kids would dress up as hobos. Boys and girls, little kids would dress up as hobos and go from door to door begging, supposedly begging for treats and money. And the money would go to charity. Some of the schools had set up things where they would funnel some of the money or all of the money that was collected into different charities, a March of Dimes or whatever. It was polio was big in those days. And so it was a very festive thing, and kids loved it. Everybody loved to get dressed up and run around. And then I also knew about the early history in Jackson Heights in the 20s and the 30s, in the 40s even, was a baby parade. And that was a big hit in the springtime. All the parents and grandparents would come out with the little infant kids in carriages and little ones, little toddlers and young kids all dressed up and march down the street in a show of, community pride and pride in the little ones. And they would even pick, the handsomest baby, the most beautiful baby, the best dressed, and all of this sort of thing. And it was very, very successful. It died out because it was a generational change. All of those kids grew up and outgrew the baby thing, and the neighborhood grew older as it does. It grows older and younger. It goes in cycles. Anyway, a combination of those two ideas I put together, and I said, I'm proposing we start a Halloween parade. And I think a Halloween parade would be very, very good for any number of reasons. I said the first is the fact that it would be a community event, and communities need things that tie them together. We have too few of them as it is. And I think it would be a nice thing for the community to get together and stage a Halloween parade. Second is we could take the holiday back because the Halloween had degenerated into a night of vandalism and petty crime. All the teenagers would be out with eggs and shaving cream and spray cans, writing graffiti all over the place and basically turning over garbage cans. It wasn't good. And we could take the holiday back and give it to the little kids and take it from the teenagers and the vandals and the kids that were, basically misbehaving. Finally, I thought it was a winner because on Halloween night, which was basically statistically a high crime night around the city would take a contingent of cops from every precinct and send them to Greenwich Village, where that parade had been going for about 4 or 5 years. And that was a big event. And so they would take a small group of and subtract cops from every precinct on a night when actually they needed more cops. And here was a way for Jackson Heights to get more cops in the neighborhood rather than giving up cops to the Halloween parade in Greenwich Village. Well, there's always opposition, and there was a little opposition there. And Jackson Heights, I used to think if somebody came up with it's no stranger, if somebody came up with the cure for cancer, there would be organized and strident and loud opposition in Jackson Heights against the cure for cancer, because that's human nature. People get upset by change because it's something unknown, and the X factor is frightening for a lot of people. But as a litigator and a trial lawyer, I had no problem with the opposition, and I actually eventually, in pretty short order, persuaded the group to endorse the idea. And that was good. And they did, and I immediately set out to start to organize the proposition. And we had a small committee. I'm against big committees because big committees end up debating everything, and the windup is oatmeal. You get a very bland and mediocre solution to anything when you have big committees. But small committees are usually more effective and more focused. And the first one to join the committee was Mike Crowley himself, who was, again, a recent ex-president. And not only that, he was a natural showman. Mike was a good guy. He was very good at showbiz. He missed his calling. Probably should have been an actor. And so I was glad to have Mike on because he had a lot of authority and a lot of respect, and I knew we would get quite a bit of cooperation. And everything went well with the small committee, and only one member of the committee was a hard time. It was a woman, and she was intractable. She just was not flexible at all. She wanted her way, and I just couldn't understand why she was so inflexible until I found out what she did for a living. She had been a flight attendant. She was a flight attendant, even at that time, a senior flight attendant on an international airline who had risen to the rank of bursar. Well, my brother worked for the airlines, and he explained what a bursar is on the planes. And he explained it this way: on a jetliner, as soon as the plane takes off, the captain is the undisputed authority in the flight deck, where it's sealed off from the rest, and at the front of the plane, and you have a navigator, a flight engineer, maybe a co-pilot, and the captain. And the captain's word is law. There is no dispute. There are no arguments. The captain has the final word. Well, in the passenger cabin, it's the same thing for the bursar. The bursar is like the chief flight attendant, and nobody can argue with the bursar. The bursar has the final say over anything that comes up in that thing, and it's undisputed. You can't even contest it. So this woman was not used to any kind of flexibility. She wanted what she wanted. Well, what she wanted in the final analysis wasn't a bad idea anyway. She said, well, at the end of the parade was going to be about 10 blocks long, we figured, because 10 blocks would give people time to march and for the parade to spread out, in gradual fashion. And it was short enough so that parents who were attending little kids could complete the march and enjoy it. It wasn't too long, too drawn out. People could also join in mid-march if they wanted. And it was supposed to end right at PS 69 on 37th Avenue in Jackson Heights, which had a big lunchroom, a big cafeteria. They had about 2,000 kids at PS 69. So what she wanted was to create inside the cafeteria a haunted house experience where you would have kids marching in and parents and marching through all of these haunted scenes. And at the end, they'd get treats, or along the way, they'd get treats, and they'd come in the front door and they would exit out the back door. And it wasn't a bad idea, and we didn't know, and it sounded good. And we thought, okay, we adopted it and took that as part of the parade. Well, the other thing I wanted to do about the parade, had one more idea, and that was to give out treat bags, which would be pre-assembled. I thought that we could go to merchants, local merchants in the neighborhood, and print up bags with plastic bags with our organizational name on it and some Halloween-themed cartoon or something on the front, and on the back have the names of the merchants who were the donors. And that went over very, very well. And I thought if we could solicit contributions of healthy things, because the kids were going to get candy and junk all over the place, I thought we could do a little bit better than that. And maybe we could have a coloring book, some crayons, some toothpaste, or kids' vitamins, raisins, fruit juice, cereal, a little dried fruit, whatever we could come up with that would be a little better, one step maybe above the usual candy that was given out. And everybody adopted that, and it was very enthusiastically received. The merchants really responded, and they were very, very good about it. And we ended up putting up thousands of bags, and we had to get everybody organized to do it. We had to get a place to receive it. We used the school to receive it, and we had volunteers to receive the goods, and trucks to transport them, and bags we had to order. And then we had an assembly line where we had a little bit of a party where 30 or so volunteers would pack all the bags in assembly line fashion. It looked like the old I Love Lucy cartoon, where everybody was passing things along. And it was fun. And we would give these things out at the end. Now, the only X factor in the whole proposition was we didn't know how many people were going to turn out, because this was unprecedented. We had never done this in the neighborhood before, and who knew, what the turnout was going to be. We didn't advertise except for posters. We had a commercial artist who was a resident in the neighborhood, very decent, who donated his talents. and made a wonderful on orange cardboard. Made a wonderful poster that we reproduced on orange poster paper, and that was put up about a week before in all the storefronts. And advertising the start of the parade, first annual Jackson Heights Beautification Group Children's Halloween Parade, 5 p.m. starts at 89th Street or 88th Street, and ends at 79th Street or 78th Street. Okay, so we put those out. And now comes Halloween night. We scheduled a parade for 5 p.m. because it was at that time of the year, the end of October, twilight time was getting dark. And also, it gave parents 2 hours between the end of school and the start of the parade to get their kids organized and dressed up and et cetera, and get them home from school and settled and get the school stuff put away and come to the parade. So it was good. And if they had to take off work, they didn't have to take off a whole day. They could take off maybe later on in the day, an hour or two from work and accompany their kids. And Mike Crowley and I divided the responsibility. It was my responsibility to supervise the start of the parade and to basically pace the parade down the street so that it would be slow and it wouldn't be too stretched out. It wouldn't be too fast. It wouldn't be too slow. And Mike was going to supervise the end at the haunted house and have supervise the entrance of the kids into the school and the processing of them through the haunted house and out the back door, et cetera, with treats. So we did set it up that way. And at the start of the parade, I started to see a lot of people were showing up. And 5 o'clock we kicked off and we marched down, and I looked back after 1 block or 2 blocks, and I said, "Wait a minute, this is a problem. I just didn't expect the turnout that we had. The turnout was enormous, enormous. Apparently, we had touched or filled a vacuum. Parents didn't know what to do with their kids on Halloween. Now they knew, and they all showed up. And I got a little bit upset, and I left the front of the parade in charge of one of the other directors. I said, keep the pace, as slow as you can. I'm going to run ahead. And I ran down 7 or 8 blocks, full speed, towards PS 69, where I knew I could find Mike. Actually, I found him a block before in front of the post office, where he was going to view the parade before, as it arrived. And I said, Mike, and I'm all out of breath. He says, what's the problem? I said, Mike, look up the street. And of course, the street was clear because the cops had cleared everything. There were no streets, no cars parked or anything else. The whole parade route was blocked off and clear. I said, Mike, look up there. And now the crowd was probably about 5 blocks away. And Mike looked up the block and he said, Jesus Christ, it's Ben-Hur. He was alluding to the biblical epic with the cast of thousands. He says, oh, my God, we're in trouble here. And we were. And we went to the front of the school, and right behind us now, at this point in time, the parade had approached, and the parents were approaching the front of the school. Now, PS 69 at the front, the main entrance, are 4 steel doors. But before the 4 steel doors, there is an entryway or an entranceway, which is basically about 20 feet by 20 feet, surrounded by wrought iron fences, like 6-foot wrought iron fences. And there were gates out front, and the gates were open. And the parents filled that up, and they kept coming like lemmings going off a cliff. I couldn't believe it. And we had little kids in strollers and little kids in their parents' arms, and I was afraid. It looked like one of these out-of-hand concerts or soccer matches where people were crushed. And I started to say a prayer. I said, oh, my God, please help us. And I looked at Mike. Mike looked at me. We had a couple of the cops, and we got to the front of the gates and shut the gates, opened the doors, let the parents in gradually, and shut the doors to everybody else and cut off the parade. We couldn't have it. We were just overwhelmed. There were a couple of thousand people out there waiting to get in the doors. And they didn't know what was in store because we had never done this before. They didn't even know what they were missing. So we got away with that. And we had the group that was segregated, and we led them through, and they went through the haunted house, and it was shambles because we were overwhelmed. Well, we never let that happen again. One of the best things about organizing the parade was the people that I had come in touch with, and one of them was the executive officer of the 115th precinct was Lieutenant Tony Mullen, who became a lifelong friend. Tony was a spectacular guy. He was an exceptional cop. He was academically highly intelligent, intellectually highly intelligent, and a street guy, all in one. And he had a great sense of discretion. And Tony and I became very, very fast friends, and we organized it in the future, which I'll get to in a minute. And he was very cooperative, and the cops were very, very good about helping to set this up because under Tony's leadership. It turns out when Tony retired a few years later, he retired as a deputy inspector and a precinct commander, and I lost contact with Tony for a while, until one day I opened up the New York Times. In the main section, there was a full-page ad commending Tony, congratulating him as the National College Teacher of the Year for the United States, and he became higher education U.S. ambassador to the world for about a year, and we're friends till this day. So the next year, Tony and I, we put our heads together, and we came up with a different finish, which was like the New York City Marathon. I had run the marathon back probably 11 or 12 years before that in 1980. And what we did was no haunted house or no bringing them into any closed quarters. What we did was the block before the end of the parade, we had cops stationed, and we had a barricade situation for we created aisles made from collapsible police barricades, temporary barricades, and the yellow tape that they used to rope off a scene. And we created about 10 aisles down the last block, where at the end of the block, we had 30 or so volunteers giving out the prepackaged bags. We had 3,500 bags prepackaged, and we ran out very, very soon. But we had cops measuring the crowd and holding the crowd back at the threshold of that last block so that there would never be overcrowding. And even if it was harmless because there was nothing to crush anybody, anything that was collapsible or just tape. And it was a much safer thing. And that worked out beautifully. And 30 some odd years later, they're still using the same technique. And I had directed the parade for the first 5 years. And then I handed it over to very capable successors, and it's now in its 31st or 32nd year, and it's going strong. And it's the largest children's parade in the city, and it's the second largest Halloween parade behind the Greenwich Village Affair in the city, and we've never advertised since. So, but it was very, very good over the years. My experience, not only as a director, but subsequently as a senior director emeritus, I came in contact with all kinds of notable people, among which were 3 mayors of New York City who came around election time. And the first one to attend the parade was Rudy Giuliani, and the second one was Mike Bloomberg, and the third one was Bill de Blasio, who came at different times. And the most notable of them, I marched the entire length of the parade with Mike Bloomberg, who's a delightful guy and very personable guy. And while we're waving to the crowd on both sides of the street, it's mobbed, it's beautiful evening. And I said, Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you for coming because your presence here validates the event and it validates the community. The people are very happy to see you and it makes us all look good. I says, and I know you've got a busy schedule and you can do other things. So I want to thank you. He says, no, Rudy. He says, let me tell you, I want to thank you. And I'll tell you why. He said, when I first got elected, Ed Koch called me up, Mayor Koch called me up and said, Mike, congratulations. He said, it's a tough job. God bless you. I wish you good luck. He said, but I'm going to tell you, the parades are the best part of the job. He said, well, the first parade I participated in as mayor, what happened to be that year, the St. Patrick's Day parade. And I participated. It was delightful. And that night I went home and I called Ed Koch and I said, Ed, you were right. I marched in the St. Patty's Day parade. It was terrific. It was one of the nicest things, he says. And you were absolutely right. He said, but Rudy, I'm going to tell you something. I marched in a lot of parades and they're not all created equal. Some parades are simply organized by the organizers for the organizers' benefit. They're kind of commercial in nature, and you can see the difference. They could be glossy and everything else. He said, but this one is the best. He said, because this one is a grassroots parade. You can't make this up. Look at these people left and right. Look at the smiles on their faces. This is genuine joy of all of these people, the kids that are participating. This is the most wonderful thing because it's 100% true. He said, it's a true community event. He says, and I'm really happy to be here. I said, I want to thank you. He says, and I mean that with all my heart. And the next thing you know, somebody runs up to him and hands him a little toddler dressed as a lion. And he's there posing for pictures with the kids with a big smile on his face. He was a very good sport and a very decent guy. And a good mayor, I might add. At the very beginning, when I organized it at first, the first 5 years, we had the benefit, the spectacular benefit. I had goodwill with the police department for any number of reasons. And we had the good fortune of having the Emerald Society Pipes and Drums of the New York Police Department, which was 60 pieces. And these guys led the parade, and they were impressive. You see 60 of these big guys with pipes and drums playing spooky, eerie music and in their kilts and costumes. And it was a very, very impressive way, matchless way to open up a Halloween parade. I can tell you that. It sent chills down everybody's spine. It was just in keeping with the whole event. It was a perfect match. And that lasted until Ray Kelly became the police commissioner in a new administration. And ironically, as a Queens guy, I thought we would be in his good favor. And it turns out he turned us down. And he cited budgetary constraints. He said, you can't have the Emerald Society Pipes and Drums. It costs us too much, and I can't afford to, in the budget, to let that happen. So that was a big disappointment, and it was hard to replace them. But what we did was we approached the various schools in the neighborhood and got the school bands to participate and take the place of the Emerald Society Pipes and Drums. And what they lacked in polish, they made up in enthusiasm. And not only that, we got even more participation from the schools. And it was a great proposition. He said, and one of the schools would come as a group. Some of them would come all in one costume or one theme. And others would come in just a group, a ragtag group of, following a banner. And now they carry color-coded balloons for each school, and it's quite nice. And they've done some very, very good things and clever things. But the best one of all is worth hearing about. It was Blessed Sacrament School, which is a Roman Catholic school, one of two in Jackson Heights, and it's now closed. But they came en masse as 101 Dalmatians. All the kids, about 100 of them, were dressed in white sweatshirts and white sweatpants with black spots, paper spots that were tacked onto their costume. So they came as 101 Dalmatians, like the Disney movie. And the young parish priest, there were two parishes. There was the old pastor and the young parish priest, the assistant. And the young one was dressed in like a military-style khaki jacket, tan jacket, like a safari-style jacket with many pockets, and a pith helmet, also tan. And he was carrying a stick with a net, like a butterfly net. And he had a sign around his neck, dog catcher. And he was marching with the kids. And the parish pastor, who was an old-timer but a regular guy, a hell of a guy, he came as a fire hydrant, and that was inspired. And the whole neighborhood talked about it and laughed, and it was so the kids loved it, and everybody loved it, and that was probably the most impressive of all the schools. But over the years, we had so many different incidents, and one of them stands out. And it turns out that my law secretary lived in Richmond Hill, and which is quite a ways across Queens from Jackson Heights in North Queens, and Richmond Hills is in South Queens. And she had two little children, Michael and Mary, and they were like Michael was probably 5 and Mary was 6 or 7. And she said, I told her, I said, Mary, you might want to bring the kids to the Jackson Heights Parade. It's really a treat for little kids. And so she took me up on it, and I marched with her. I got them right to the front of the parade, and I marched with them. And we're marching down the street. And about midway down the street, unscripted, the parade grinds to a halt. Everybody stops and stares to the left, because coming out of one of the buildings that lined the parade route, coming out of a ground floor doorway, is a store, and there are 2 apartments above the storefronts on all of these buildings. Coming out of the side, like the residential doorway, is Frankenstein. And this Frankenstein had to be a professional actor, because this Frankenstein, first of all, was tall. Frankenstein was in a Broadway quality costume. This was not just an amateur job. This was spectacular. This looked like the real thing right out of the movies. and it was totally in character. It wasn't he or she, whoever it was, had to be an actor because they had all the mannerisms down. It was herky-jerky, lurching forward, and it stunned. Even the grown-ups were stunned because it was a surprise. But the little kids, we had 100 little Ninja Turtles, swashbuckling, brave Ninja Turtles hanging onto their mother's legs, peeking out from behind their mothers. They were afraid at the sight of Frankenstein. And coincidentally, at that point in time, Frankenstein marches right into the center of the parade where, at that point in the parade, there's an exhibit or a group, and it's the local undertaker with 6 pallbearers escorting an open casket with a live corpse, a so-called corpse in the casket. And Frankenstein walks over or lurches over to the casket and looks, curiously at the corpse, and the corpse gets up and shakes Frankenstein's hand, and Frankenstein pats the corpse on the head, and the kids are going crazy, and the adults never forgot that. So it was quite a memorable moment. So the next year, Mary asked the 2 kids, little Michael and little Mary, if they wanted to stay in Richmond Hill and go trick-or-treating, or they wanted to come to Jackson Heights. And little Michael said to his mother, "Mom, we have to go to Jackson Heights. We have to go to Jackson Heights." She says, "Why?" He said, "Well, because we're going to see Frankenstein." She said, "Well, Michael," she said, "I don't know if we're going to see Frankenstein. What makes you think we're going to see Frankenstein?" He said, "Mom, we're going to see Frankenstein because he lives in Jackson Heights." And they came that year. They were a little disappointed, but they got over it. The point of all the thing in retrospect is that in our nation, and community activity seems to be reducing itself and on the wane, especially in the age of computers and in the pandemic. Community activities are diminishing in number and quality. But in Jackson Heights, the torch of community burns very bright. And one of the reasons is, and I'm proud to say it, is that Jackson Heights Beautification Group annual Children's Halloween Parade. Thanks for listening. Come back next week for another episode of Uncommon Law, lessons they don't teach in law school. I'm Judge Rudy Greco. Court is adjourned.